What is happening, boys and girls? Jim here, RC After Dark. It's about 6 o'clock in the morning. I've been up all night doing some late night tuning on a whole bunch of RC cars, changing out pinion gears. And the Axial SCX10 early Ford Bronco is the last one that I need to work on. And I figured I would take you guys on this tour along with me. I haven't worked on this thing as of yet. I want to change the pinion gear and lower it down a little bit. We've been doing a lot of rock crawling here on my channel as of late with just about every crawler that we have on my channel. And after I've been going back and reviewing videos, I've been watching certain vehicles and looking at certain vehicles and realizing that I need to drastically lower the pinion gear on a few of those. So Axial Bronco is one of those. This also applies to the Axial SCX10 Jeep CJ7 as well. They both share the same style transmission. Axial early Ford Bronco is no longer in production. The Jeep still is in production. So I haven't had this vehicle apart as of yet, but I figured I'll take you guys and gals on a little tour along with me. As far as manual goes for the vehicle, they do have a manual for it, but it just has a blown up schematic of the vehicle, so really no instructions on how to change out the pinion gear. And since there's no real written instructions on it, I figured I'd show you guys how to go about that. So changing the pinion gear, that is one of the easiest things you can do to get a little bit more power out of your vehicle. Once again, last time I had this thing out on the rocks, just didn't have enough low end oomph. When it came to climbing over obstacles that were taller than the tires, you had to give it quite a bit of throttle to get the vehicle to climb up and over. And by the time it started to make the apex and crawl over the apex of the rock or obstacle, it would kind of fling itself up and over because you had that so much throttle input going into it. So we need to lower the pinion gear on this thing. That way we can crawl up a rock face or hill face or whatever without really having to give it a bunch of throttle to do it. So want to get a little bit more controlled crawling out of here. Once again, the easiest way to do that is to drop down the pinion gear on the motor. All right, so whenever it comes to working on your vehicle, it is a do-it-your-own risk situation. Whenever you decide to turn a wrench on your vehicle, if you break something, strip out a screw, whatever, that is your own fault and not the fault of somebody who's doing a video. So if you're watching a video such as this or any other video on any other online viewing source and you see somebody working on their vehicle and you decide to do the same thing and you strip out a screw head or strip out the threads on the screw or mess something up somewhere down the line, you can't blame the person who's doing the tutorial video. That is your own fault. You're the person that's working on the vehicle. So just want to keep that in mind. Whenever it comes to working on your vehicle, that is a do-it-your-own risk situation. I like to point that out whenever we're doing any kind of modification videos, just so everybody's clear. All right, so we're going to spin the truck around, get our camera up on the tripod, and dive into this transmission and see what she's all about. Now we've got our engine housing on here, our little faux engine housing, which is going over top of the servo, and our stock 540 motor down there, which is a 35 turn 540, I believe. So we've got a lot of screws sitting up here. 1, 2, 3, 4, and probably these two right here, 5 and 6, going around the motor and the bell housing on the transmission. But this part, I believe, is screwed directly to this part. So I think we're going to try to leave this attached and just take out this screw here and this screw over here and see if we can take this whole engine assembly right off the top. So we'll start off by doing that. And I believe that's an M 2.5 mil, I want to say. I could be wrong. Maybe we can zoom in on it with the camera and get a better idea what size this wrench is. 5/64 or 2 millimeter. So 2 millimeter hex wrench on this one. I'm going for these guys right up here. Hopefully we're catching it. Yep, we are. I'm using a Team Associated hex wrench set. We are currently in a partnership program once again with A-Man Hobbies and AvantLink. So we'll be leaving links in the video down below for certain things. I like these Team Associated hex wrenches. They come with a medley of different style ones you can get. Some with nut drivers on the end that you can use on for taking your tires and wheels off. Makes it nice and easy. As well as others that have a medley of different size hex wrenches in the handle. These are very nice. Very nice. I'm sure there's probably better ones out there, but for what they are, they're nice. And, you know, they've got the normal head on it, so you can chuck it into a drill if you want to. They're not magnetic, but I magnetize mine with a magnetizer. Okay, so we got those two screws out. They're both the same size. We're putting them off to the side, upside down. And there we're able to pull off our engine housing without removing these other two screws. I'm kind of happy about that. The less you have to take apart, the better. That one was a little bit loose. That one was a little bit loose too. Alright, we'll get that off to the side. Some added weight there. Looking at our motor, we've got a Horizon Hobbies Dynamite 35 turn motor right there. That is the same motor, the exact same motor that comes in the Vatera Ascenders. Same one. I've got a few of those laying around. All right, so the next two screws to remove are this one right here and this one right over here. And we should be able to pop this top cover off, giving us access to the motor. Excuse me. I've been up all night, and it's once again right around 6 o'clock in the morning. Last vehicle to be worked on. Well, not necessarily. I need to go into the Trail Finder too and rebuild the front axle on that one, since we broke a steering knuckle off the top of the axle, or at least the screw holes for the knuckle. And we need to replace a couple of leaf springs as well. All right, so this is a little bit tough. Wanting to pull up on this thing is not very... and you can't really get your hand in from underneath to get at that. Let's see if we can find a screwdriver over here. And maybe pry up in underneath, and there we go. I'm prying underneath between the motor right here, and just below it there's a little motor mount. And I'm prying down in here, just like this. And we're popping that up out of there. Okay, well, there we go. Not as smooth as I expected. This is a first for me too. So there is our bell housing cover, popped off the top, and we've got access to our motor. So let's take a peek at this here. We have a camera on the tripod once again. Wow, that's a little bit concerning. Pinion gear wasn't lined up with the spur gear from day one. Look at that. But it looks like we have a metal pinion gear, obviously, and the metal spur gear. That's kind of cool. Alright, so we'll pull this baby out of here. And it also looks like we've got different positions on this motor plate for different pinion gears. There we go. And we got a rip out of there. Have to get our camera in there and get a closer look since we have this baby plugged in. We will just zoom in on it here and see what we got. Alright, so we've got different numbers for different size pinion gears. You just put the motor in the right slot for the corresponding gear. "13, 14, 15's open." Yeah, it's a 14 tooth. And I've got a 13 and a 12 sitting here. I think we're going to have to use a 12 because I don't think dropping down to a 13 is going to give us much of a difference out there in the rocks. 11 would probably make a difference. For sure. That's a no-brainer. But I don't think going to a 13 is going to make much of a difference. So I think we're going to have to go to a 12 tooth on this one. Noticing this has got a little notch right here on the side by my thumb, so that's good to know. It fits in one way. And just a matter of getting everything lined back up again. Oh, we're zooming back out here. Excuse the unprofessionalism, getting used to a brand new camera here. Well, we're going to go from a 14 down to a 12 once again. Loosen up our motor screws. I ordered some gears for this as well. An 11 tooth, another 12 tooth. But since they're not here, we'll just use the one that we currently have. So All right, well, we're going to change this up to a 12 tooth. So moving that over to here. Moving this screw over to the other corresponding 12 screw hole. We'll find where the screw holes are at on the motor and line it back up. Make sure both are going in before we start driving them home. And you know, before I do that, we're gonna have to take that back off because we can barely access our pin over here on the side. It's 6 o'clock in the morning. We'll take this right off of here. We got it set up for our 12 tooth gear. Having our screws in the 12 tooth hole slot there. We're going to set this face down on a piece of paper and get our pinion gear removed. That is a healthy pinion gear on there. Looks relatively chunky. And it looks like it has a same screw that we've been using here, the 2mm. Yes, it is. It's a fat pinion gear to be held on with that heavy of a screw, rope screw. You definitely have Loctite in that, or some kind of thread locking compound. Yeah. It says 14 on the back. And big heavy grub screw. I like that. That's nice. It's a heavy gear. A lot of weight to that. Now the gear that we're putting in here is a ProTech gear, and this one actually has a 5mm bore instead of a 1/8 bore, and has a reducer sleeve. Yeah. Well, it's a bummer that we have to deal with the reducer sleeve, but it is what it is. So we'll pause the camera here real quick, get this thing set up, and get ourselves put back in place. Well, we'll just let it run. Why not? Room's paid for, right? So go. Kids, be careful with knives. We'll leave part numbers for and links down below for anything that may require a link. I don't know if I really want to leave a link to this ProTech gear because we're going to swap it out to a Robinson Racing gear here in a couple days. This did include a piece of paper for doing the gear mesh. We've got our gear, a huge bore, a reducer sleeve, and our grub screw. So we're going to slide our reducer sleeve into our gear once we figure out where the grub screw is going to go. We get our holes lined up. Slide that through like that. Get our grub screw put in place. Try to line everything back up again. Alright, so we're just screwing this in to the point where it's grabbing that sleeve and not letting it drop back out of there, making sure that we have the sleeve with our open hole where it needs to be in front of our pin here. Okay, it's got a hold of it. And we'll get this positioned onto the motor as best we can. Trying to make it where it's going to be biting. Definitely got to go out a little bit here on the shaft. There's no doubt about that. So I'm just going to kind of mock fit this on here. And put the motor where I think it should go. and eyeball it up, which doesn't look too bad right here. Probably bring it in just a little bit further, maybe. I don't know. Let's throw our motor plate on there and see what it looks like. Now the good news is that we've got plenty of access to the grub screw on our pinion gear. Sticking out quite a bit here. Snug these down, not going too crazy. Making sure it's in there. We've got great access to our pinion gear right now to the grub screw on the back. Much better than what it was with our stock pinion gear on there. I'm just going to set this down in, try to line up our hole here. Let's see how everything jives. And I think we might need to move our pinion gear back out a little bit. Looking at it upside down. It's not too bad, really. It's within. It's a little bit on the inside of the spur gear there. Yeah, it looks like a little bit on the inside of the spur gear over here on this other side, too. I'd almost like to push that out just a wee bit further. Just a pinch. So we'll loosen this up just a little bit. Try to slide that out just a little bit. And I think that looks okay right there. I think we just split the difference. We got it sitting just about in the middle there. All right, well, that's where we want to be. Finally. Pull this out of here. Put our driver and our wrench. Get our motor line back up. Wires and all that other nonsense. Probably in the way. Okay. We got a motor sitting back down in here. Line back up. It's guaranteed gear mesh when you got a little motor set up like that with everything marked off. So guaranteed gear mesh on that. And I don't know if this is going to be recommended or not, but I'm going to use a pencil right here and I'm going to scrape off a little bit. Scrape the pencil on the gear a little bit. Use the gear to scrape some lead off the pencil, some graphite. Probably cause cancer to people in California. Guaranteed. Be a lot easier just to get a bottle of graphite instead of using a pencil. Rotating the gear and scraping some graphite off into the gears for a little bit of lubricant. We used to use graphite back in the day. Probably a little bit unconventional, but there we go. Alright, well, we got her in there. We got some graphite on our gear. Not that it matters. We'll get our next little piece put in place. with our little ridge parts pointing out. Get that snap back in, just like so. Got 2 little hold down screws put back in place. Not driving either one of them all the way in until I get them both kind of on the way in the same position. You just kind of tighten up until they stop. Just flatten out and you're all good. Motor housing, get that put back in place here. Make sure our wires and all that nonsense are out of the way. Now's the time to do all that while we're here, because we're pulling on stuff there. Our motor is holding our inner fenders in place on either side, so making sure we get everything all lined back up as we put this back together. This is just decorational piece right here, so don't go crazy. I mean, it's holding your fenders in as well, but it's not like you're applying. It's not like it's holding down your pinion gear. Doesn't have to be too tight. It's funny. All right, there we go. She's all back together, boys and girls. We've got our pinion gear swapped, going from this massive, beefy 14-tooth pinion gear. That thing is really weighty, over to our smaller 12-tooth pinion gear. Not that it's bad to have that much weight on there. It's like a flywheel effect with that much weight on there. So, anyways, there we go, boys and girls. That is how you change the pinion gear on the SCX10 early Ford Bronco or SCX10 Jeep. All right, so that is going to do it, boys and girls. Very much appreciated for y'all sticking around and watching the video. As always, questions and comments are always welcome, and we will see you all on the next one. Thanks again.